Now, we've got a special treat for you today. This is going to blow your mind. Our guest today is one of Australia's most well-known mountaineers, and he has climbed to the top of the world's biggest mountain, Mount Everest. Not only that, but this survivor went down in the death zone, and is the only person to live through such an ordeal. This man is going to be a wealth of information on what it takes to be a survivor, and once again, what it takes to battle against the odds and win. Our guest today is none other than Lincoln Hall. Guys, if you make him welcome, please. Well, Lincoln, thank you very much for joining us, mate.
My pleasure.
So you're standing on top of Everest.
Yeah.
A lifetime dream, the highest point on Earth. How was the feeling like?
Well,
I can't imagine. That's got to be the greatest thing ever.
Well, you certainly know you're on the summit of Everest. Everything you can see forever. And if you look up, it looks, I don't know why I looked up, but I looked up and it was dark. You know, I mean, not dark, but the sky was really deep blue, and you sort of felt that if you stepped off, you'd float up. And of course you wouldn't, and I wasn't going to do that. That's when I realised that this really was the limit of what you can achieve, what humans can achieve.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just one of those amazing quirks of fate that Mount Everest is just high enough to give climbers who get to the summit a total body, mind and soul lift.
Yeah.
Any higher and you wouldn't get there. So it's just one of those amazing coincidences that the world...
How long were you on the summit for?
Well, only 20 minutes. And the reason we turned back after 20 minutes is because the ridge leading up to the final summit on the northeast ridge is quite narrow and icy. And we're up there on the summit, and we could see the climbers who'd been behind us were now coming up because we'd stopped moving, they were getting closer. And I thought, well, we've got to get down out of this narrow, slippery bit before they come up, otherwise we'll get stuck up there in a sort of like a traffic jam. And I knew, as soon as I got to the top, the most important thing was getting down. And what happened, I remember coming down a slope, and we had a rope there on a little steep bit, and I just unclipping from one anchor to another anchor on the rope, and I just sort of was in the snow, and then I sort of passed out. And it wasn't just exhaustion, it was cerebral edema. And cerebral edema is where you get fluid retention within your skull. And your skull, of course, doesn't expand. And so it puts pressure on your brain and makes you go delirious, and puts pressure on the top of your spinal cord. And basically, the only way to survive that at extreme altitude is to descend, and descend very quickly. And
So you still had oxygen at this time?
I did, yes.
And what height was that?
Well, I was only probably 50 metres below the summit. And there came to a point, there's a particular cliff called the second step, and that's the hardest part of the climb on the north side of Everest. Whether you're going up or down, that second step is the hardest. And it's where a lot of people turn back, a lot of people die there. But what happened to me was, I guess, 30 years of climbing mountains, and the instinct kicked in that, Lincoln, you really got to focus on this. You really got to get this one right. And so I managed to abseil down the cliff, and there's a huge pulse of adrenaline, because I was suddenly flying down and seeing this huge drop, and suddenly I was totally lucid again, totally exhausted still. And so that shot of adrenaline, I think, kept me going, I don't know, maybe it was half an hour or an hour. But it got me to the point where I got to 8,600 metres, which doesn't sound, it's not much lower. And when I got to that point, I wanted to talk to the Sherpas, and I knew what I wanted to say, but then I found I couldn't even speak. And I went off, what happened to me was I actually went off into a whole bunch of hallucinations. But meanwhile, the two Sherpas I was with, there was no pulse that they could feel, there was no sense of breath. One of them poked me in the eye, and I was just lying there glassy-eyed.
So the expedition leader is under the impression that you're gone?
Yeah, and in fact the Sherpas had to leave me because there was no signs of life. I was just lying there, and it was very easy for the expedition leader to believe that I had died, because there'd been another, on that whole season, 11 people had died, and I was going to be number 12. And in fact, the word went out to the world that I was gone, and that included my family.
So they're on the way down after 19 hours.
I'm left for dead, sun setting.
You're left for dead with the sun going down?
Yeah, beautiful sunset. Well, you know, we all like a nice sunset. Sometime in the middle of the night, I've got no idea when, pitch black, I woke up, suddenly, totally lucid, and there was I could feel this swirling of wind going around like this, and which just instantly meant that I was on the edge of a cliff, and I was feeling around like that, and I couldn't get any grip, I couldn't find my pack, I couldn't find my pack because the Sherpas had taken it because I was dead, and dead guys don't need packs. And I was feeling totally disoriented, and I was feeling around like this. And then I realised the reason I was disoriented because I couldn't feel anything, and the reason I couldn't feel anything because all my fingers were frozen like wood, and that's exactly what they felt like. That the end of my fingers were wood.
So what did it come down to? Did you say, well, I'm going to fight like hell to get down this mountain?
Well, no, what happened was, as with any really difficult challenge that you face, you're not going to get anywhere unless you take the first step. And you don't know if the first step's going to get you anywhere until you take the second step. Well, my first step was to get through the night. Now, that sounds pretty easy, but I knew that if I even just went like that, then I would have just drifted off, and it would have been so comfortable and warm. However, at that point, there was no way I was going to just let myself drift off. So, and the real driver for me to make that first step was the fact that I had to get back to my family. This is the number one goal of my expeditions, always, is I come back. And so what I had to do was find a way that I could stay awake. And the way I did that was to have to make a decision, because I had nothing else to use. I mean, I couldn't even feel my hands. I couldn't even count with them because I couldn't feel them. So what I ended up doing was I just went like this and stopped. And then I went like that, and then I stopped. And then I just kept doing that. And it sounds pretty easy, but what it meant was I was making a decision. I'll stop now, or I'll go a bit faster, or I'll do this, make it a real slow one. And I think, ironically, the reason that I survived is because my brain was so compromised, and with a shortage of oxygen and the edema, my brain could only cope with so much. And I set it with this one goal, and the one goal was just to keep doing this.
So you broke it down into small, manageable chunks. You went, right, survive the night, next goal, base camp.
Yeah. And so what happened, I don't know how long during the night that went on for, but I know that first thing in the morning, 4 guys came up, and it was just getting light. And these were the last climbers to be attempting Everest that season, and they'd been told to expect my death. And there I was, and I wasn't dead.
Sitting cross-legged rocking on the cliff face.
Yes, that's right. And what I said to them, which was really not indicative of my mental state, what I said to them was, I imagine you're surprised to see me here. And of course they were totally gobsmacked. And one of them started to cry because he could see that I was about to die. I mean, reaching the summit of Everest was an amazing thing. But the really fantastic part of it is what I learned afterwards, like that whole experience of surviving that night, of being able to push through what effectively was the impossible.
What was it that kept you driving through that? Like, where did that come from? It's, to me, superhuman. I mean,
well, I think what it means is we can all do a lot more than we think we can. But you have to believe in it. It's not much, you don't just tell yourself, you've got to believe in it. And
you know that, guys? There's a difference.
Yeah.
There's a massive difference.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
Between doing and thinking.
Yeah, because if I just said to myself, I'll get through the night, you know, it was like, definitely, I'm going to get through the night because that's the one thing I can do. What I can do after that, I've got no idea, but I'm not going to get anywhere if I can get this first one out of the way.
Control the controllable, see?
Yeah, controllable. And so, and at that point, that's as far as I got. What lay beyond that was uncontrollable for me. And that's when those amazing guys came up and looked after me.
All right, mate, well, I was wondering how you feel about having a little go on our climbing wall we've set up over the back there.
That'd be great.
I'd love you just to show the contestants that with guts and determination against the odds and even with the injuries that you sustained, that you can still get back to something you love, that if people say you can't do it, that you can buck the system and do it.
Okay, well, let's see how we go.